Nowhere will you ever find an update as weird as this, where we have ourselves the idea of a trade that has been floating around for the past few weeks. Everybody's talking about this idea. It's on social media, it's on TV, it's on the radio. People are discussing this around the hockey world. And rarely will you ever see a situation like this where all of a sudden a teammate of the player involved gives his opinion as to what this could look like if this trade were to happen, what this could be. You rarely see hockey players get involved in this kind of discourse, but leave it over to the folks on the Sans Restriction podcast because they posted an Instagram clip collaborated with the Bet99 Sportsbook of Maxime Comtois going out there and talking about his opinion as to what Trevor Zegras with the Montreal Canadiens could actually look like. This is episode 325 of the Sans Restriction podcast, and I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and listen to the entire clip. It's available on Instagram. Big shout out over to the folks over on the pod. But because we had ourselves Maxime Comtois, a legit former teammate of Trevor Zegras, literally going out there and getting asked by the folks on the show, hey, how do you feel about Trevor Zegras and the Montreal Canadiens? What do you think he could bring to this team? We had ourselves an opinion from a literal Zegras teammate himself as to how this could all go down. Now, I'll be upfront and honest here. Comtois is not Zegras' teammate anymore. Zegras, of course, is with the Anaheim Ducks. Comtois was with the Ducks last year. In 22-23, he had 19 points in 64 games played. This season, Comtois spent one game with the Carolina Hurricanes and one game in the playoffs, but 65 games with the Chicago Wolves in the AHL. He had 44 points, pretty good production, all things considered, but of course, we recognize that Maxime Comtois is a guy that I think a lot of Ducks fans maybe hoped for more middle six to top six potential out of during some of his development years. Either way, he's 25 years old now. He's in the Carolina system, signed on till the end of this season, so we'll see what happens with Comtois as he continues his hockey playing career. But to help us out with what was said by Comtois on this podcast episode, we're going over on to HabsFanatics.com because, look, the podcast is based in Quebec. Comtois is from Quebec. It's in French, and I don't want to go out there and transcribe it all myself, so we're using the folks on HabsFanatics.com because they have the quote here translated into English. Take a look at what Comtois' opinion was about a Zegras trade to Montreal. I think that Zegras will have a significant adjustment period if he comes to Montreal. He's an extremely offensive guy and good with the puck. He's a playmaker. He's going to score points. The only thing is that he is so offensive and sometimes he forgets there's a defensive zone. And when I initially saw that there was a podcast of Comtois going out there and discussing his thoughts on a Zegras to Montreal trade, I didn't think he'd be bringing the heat like this. Hey, Zegras is really good offensively, but he'll probably struggle a little bit because he almost forgets sometimes that there is a defensive zone to play. Now, that is not coming from one of the top guys in the Anaheim Ducks. No, this is coming from Maxime Comtois. Admittedly, Comtois is not the player that Trevor Zegras is, so it kind of speaks even more magnitude of importance to this idea that Comtois is presenting. Where a player that is in the AHL, he's not good enough to play in the NHL, nor was he better than Zegras when they were both in Anaheim together. For a player like that to specifically call out Zegras' defensive game in a way, I get it, it's a pretty innocuous comment, it's not something that I think is surprising, but just to hear it be said on a show, it's very intriguing to me, and it does illuminate more of a perspective, I would say, as to what maybe some NHL players feel about this potential acquisition, and how it speaks to the Montreal Canadiens and their overall reputation too. How it's even a point to be brought up that, hey, this guy might not fit well in Montreal because he doesn't really play well defensively. It sets the expectation and the standard there that Montreal is not going to take any passengers. They're not going to take guys that don't know how to play 200 feet, and Martin St. Louis is not going to have the patience to try to mold players who don't naturally do that into players who will start thinking about the game in 3 zones at a time rather than just one. Now, of course, the quote that we read is just one quote out of the many in this few minute-long podcast segment of Maxime Comtois talking about Zegras, but it was intriguing enough for me to go out there and make a video about, especially considering that this is a former teammate of his literally speaking out about the idea of a Zegras trade. Hey, he's a great player, he's fantastic offensively, we knew that, but he does need to improve his defensive play. And the funny part is, you can tell that Comtois has a little bit of difficulty getting it out there. Like, I get it, you know, like podcast clips when they're posted onto Instagram Reels and stuff, they're usually shortened. They edit out some of the breaks in speech and they allow for a more fast and seamless kind of transition between sentences. So if you listen to the actual podcast, there will probably be more gaps in the speeches and stuff. It's not usually as quick flowing. But for Maxime Comtois in this commentary, there is a pretty significant period where he has to take some time to think before he makes his verdict. There's a little bit of hesitation there. He doesn't want to fully admit that Zegras needs some work on his defensive play, and he's very quick to point out that, yeah, the guy is fantastic at passing, at getting points, at playmaking. He's amazing offensively. He doesn't back down from that opinion. But then again, is that really surprising to hear? Everybody knows how talented Zegras could be. It's just, will Martin St. Louis be interested in a player who has so much to offer in one end of the ice, but whom one of his teammates is even calling out saying, yeah, he needs to work on his defensive game. He sometimes forgets there's a defensive zone. That is some pretty damning comments, especially for a guy in Comtois who is Quebecois, so you can tell he was a Canadiens fan most likely growing up. I'm just assuming here, but I don't think I'd be wrong in that respect. So for him to go out there and get asked about it and respond to it as well, I thought was super interesting, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. How do you feel about Maxime Comtois, former Trevor Zegras teammate, going out there and talking about Z and the Canadiens on a podcast? Carolina Hurricanes fans as well, I'm very interested in seeing this, but if there are any Canes fans who are tuning into this video, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. How did you feel about Maxime Comtois and his development this season? This is like a total aside, not really related to Zegras at all, but just because we're talking about Comtois, I mean, this guy was one of the guys that I think Anaheim Ducks fans thought was going to be super good for their team, but he ended up not really amounting to much. I mean, he had a 33-point season in 55 games in 2020, 2021, but never really superseded that in the upcoming years. He ended up declining, and he was a minus player, and the Anaheim Ducks are really bad, and so he eventually just departed the team. So if you're a Carolina Hurricanes fan, what are your thoughts on the way that Comtois has developed since then? If you're a Ducks fan, how do you feel about Comtois speaking about Zegras in this way? And what are your thoughts on the way Comtois' entire career has gone down? I know this is not really a Comtois video, but it kind of is. I wanted to get the scoop here because, of course, I haven't been paying too much attention to the Chicago Wolves in the AHL this previous season, so I'm pretty much out of the loop here. All I can do is look at the numbers and say, hey, he had a pretty alright season, point production included, but I mean, the guy's 25 years old now. There was a point in his career where, as the captain of Team Canada at the World Juniors, we all thought he would be amazing, but I don't know, he's now here. So, Ducks fans, Hurricanes fans, and of course Montreal Canadiens fans, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Maxime Comtois calling out Trevor Zegras for his defensive play, and how this may be a problem should he get traded over to the Montreal Canadiens. Do you agree, disagree, why or why not? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.